My name is Matthew Agarwala, and I am the Bennett Professor and Chair of Sustainable Finance at the Bennett Institute for Innovation and Policy Acceleration here at the University of Sussex. I'm really excited to be sharing this masterclass with you today on making a living by making a difference, how we can develop careers in sustainability, and specifically how those of you studying at the University of Sussex can leverage the skills you develop during your studies into rewarding careers that take you to good incomes, high impact, making the world a better place all around the world. I'm delighted that this gets to be my topic because my career in sustainability has been so much fun, and I really want to share some of those tips and tricks that I've learned with you on how to launch on this really exciting pathway. So, the first thing we want to think about is why might we actually want to consider a career in sustainability? Well, I think it's got fantastic options, whether you're looking for high income, positive impact, or both. I think that sustainability careers now are no longer a niche. They span finance, consulting, government policy, new tech startups, and beyond. And the careers that I've enjoyed and worked on, and the people I've worked with, those are jobs and opportunities that have existed over the past 15 or 20 years or so. But for many of you, you might even start creating new careers in sustainability that haven't even existed yet. And I think that's where some of the most exciting opportunities might be. So I hope we can pull some of those out in the questions and answer later today. I think that sustainability, and it's not just I think, the data, the facts on the ground are that sustainability is one of the fastest growing industries here in the UK and internationally. And I think what's really exciting about it is that the skills that we deliver and develop at the University of Sussex around sustainability in finance, economics, marketing, accounting, strategy, all of these skills are future-proofed, and they are absolutely relevant to the cutting edge of sustainability careers. But I want to give you a little bit of a background of my unusual pathway and what it is that I actually do. So yes, I am a professor at the University of Sussex. That means I do research, working on academic papers. It also means I do lots of policy advice. So we are at the Bennett Institute for Innovation and Policy Acceleration. And so one of our core reasons to exist is to engage with the policy world. That means local government in Sussex, means national government in the United Kingdom, and it means international organizations like the IMF, the World Bank, the United Nations. And I even get to chair the fiscal policy panel for the states of Guernsey, which gives me really deep insight into how you design taxes in a small economy. On top of that, I do public speaking. I'm a consultant. I have a small consulting firm that my wife and I opened a few years ago, and we run that together. And that provides really exciting opportunity to work at the coalface, as it were, on the cutting edge of real world applied sustainability analysis. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the opportunities that that has brought as well. And I'm a media contributor. I'm often in The Guardian or the Financial Times. I work with Channel 4 quite a bit. And the reason that I want to share all of this with you today is to show that you can, as a finance guy or as a woman in marketing, actually sit down in these sort of dusty boardrooms, speak to credit ratings agencies, finance ministers, etc., while still working on climate, on air quality, on nature and biodiversity, on protecting the oceans. And that's the kind of career that I would like you to see as normal. So, why pursue these careers? Well, it leads to well-paying jobs. The average annual wage in the green sector across all of the UK economy is around £43,000. That's about £5,500 more than the median wage in the UK. That's a substantial wage premium for working in the green sector. The UK net zero sector is booming at the moment. It's growing 3 times faster than the overall economy. This is where the exciting, new, rewarding, high-paid jobs really are. In the UK, we've seen around 690, it's actually a bit more than that, some estimates up to 1 million jobs in the green sector at the moment. This is using Office for National Statistic data, and that's a 35% increase in the number of jobs available in this field in just the past decade. There are very few sectors in the UK or even the global economy that are actually growing at that kind of pace. And so I think this is a great place for you to be lining up careers. And for me, one of the most rewarding elements of this is that you get to deliver real world impact. People care about what sustainability means for themselves, their lives, their families, but also for their businesses, for their country, and for the future. And by honing your skills in sustainability, by working in consultancy, accounting, the civil service, running for elected office, you can actually deliver that kind of impact based on the skills you get here at the University of Sussex. I'm showing you on the right hand here just some basic stats from LinkedIn and the World Economic Forum. This is just a year's worth of growth. LinkedIn is seeing a 22% increase in the share of job postings that require at least one green skill. Now, it's not just about employability, it's about what you get to do with your life. I know that's hugely important to all students. It's hugely important to me. The reason I'm in this field of sustainability and research and economics and policy is because it gets to create this wonderful, exciting life. I'm showing you some of the countries I've gotten to engage with and visit just in the past couple of years on sustainability. It is in demand in every single country. Now, some of this work has been pretty simple. I go and give a keynote lecture for the World Bank in Rwanda. Some of it has been years-long, in-depth engagement. Say with Qatar, I developed a sustainability strategy based on the latest economic research for Qatar. Sometimes it's just an academic conference you get to go to, a policy conference, speaking at, say, the COP conferences. I got to go to Azerbaijan. I forgot to put that on the slide. I was in Baku just a couple of years ago. These are all photos that I'm in or have taken. One of them here is in Dubai. I get to go there and speak about sustainable investment. Some of the largest wells of green financial capital are coming out of the Middle East at the moment. The photo of the gorilla is one that I got to take when working with the World Bank on natural capital accounting in sub-Saharan Africa. And of course, you take the weekend, you go and see the gorillas, you do some hiking. And on the right here, I'm showing you a picture at the OECD. I get to go there every couple of, maybe a couple of times a year. And we work on policies and economic strategy in order to advance the European Union's and the OECD's green policy agenda. So it is in demand in every country. And whether you are from the UK and you're thinking about exporting your skills the way that I do, living here but working across the world, or whether you're from somewhere else in the world and you're taking your skills here and you're going to go back and apply them in your home country, there will be demand. All you have to do is hone the skills and demonstrate that you can actually help solve problems. Now, my career path has been a little bit unusual. So I did an undergraduate in economics and political science at McMaster in Canada. I did a master's in economic policy, again, at McMaster in Canada. Then I came to the UK to do a PhD in environmental and resource economics. That completed in 2020. I took up my chair as a sustainable finance professor at the University of Sussex 4 years later, just the middle of last year. In that time, I've worked at McMaster University in Canada, the London School of Economics, the University of East Anglia, University of Cambridge, now Sussex. I hold a senior policy fellowship at Yale University, and I'm an honorary professor at Scotland's Royal College, and founded a consultancy a few years ago. My path through sustainability careers has really focused on economic research, climate change, and the environment, nature, biodiversity. So I've gotten to comment on things around environmental protection, circular economy, knowledge integration, the green skills economy, social well-being, how a healthier, cleaner environment helps create healthier, cleaner communities, more productive workforces. And I've gotten to work quite a bit on resource sustainability. Um, my approach has been through research, but yours doesn't have to be. There are lots of different pathways into this. You could go and work for one of the big four consulting firms. You could go and work for the civil service. The Government Economic Service is actually the largest employer of economists in the United Kingdom, and we got to hold for them a masterclass on sustainability and productivity. And so this is one of the areas where we can collaborate with governments. And it's intensely rewarding, this journey. It's rewarding to see your work cited and quoted by the Biden-Harris administration in live real-world policy documents. And it's rewarding to see your work celebrated in the national press. And in fact, this year, my colleagues and I were awarded the 2025 Financial Times Award for Academic Research with Impact. Now, I'm trying to convince you that my narrow pathway based on economics research is not the only way to deliver for a career in sustainability. It is ubiquitous. It is across every sector and every industry. If you want to work in finance, well, there are loads of roles for sustainable finance analysts. Identifying, pricing, managing climate risk is really important. So if you've got those quantitative modeling skills, that's a great way to go. In consultancies, this is where I get to do a lot of really applied and exciting work. You can work with governments all around the world. Now, the management consultancies often come in for a lot of flack, and some of that's justified. Not all of the work's always up to scratch. But I was working with KPMG this year, still am working with them, and I was in Barbados. And one of the things that struck me was that we're doing some work with Barbados on how to deliver a sustainable macroeconomic strategy for a small island economy. And I was thinking about the population of Barbados. It's about 220, 230,000 people. So that's a fairly narrow talent pool that you have to draw on to deliver all of the functions of government, including your sustainability and economic strategies. And I was also speaking at the same time with the global chairman and CEO of KPMG, Bill Thomas. And I was asking him how many employees they have. And they've got about 285,000 employees worldwide. So the skill set that KPMG has to draw on is larger than the entire population of one of the countries that they're helping advise. And I think that's where these sorts of consulting roles, working with governments, with finance ministries, with trade ministries, with tourism ministries, to be able to help improve the sustainable tourism and the sustainable growth opportunities is really a rewarding place to go and work. And there's at least two models here. One is you could go and work directly for KPMG or any of the others. And the second is the route that I've taken. I've got my own skill set and I work with them actually as a subcontractor. So they're essentially one of my clients. They need some expertise. I've got it. I sit down and write a report, do some number crunching for them. And in fact, I got to work with one of my master's students from the University of Sussex on this project this year. So I think that's a really exciting model as well. There's loads of opportunities in government and policy, whether that's local government, national government here in the UK, or whether it's working with the United Nations or development banks all around the world. I think on the private sector side, on tech, data science, data analysis, and big corporate roles, there are huge opportunities as well. Whether you're in manufacturing or construction or in big infrastructure projects, whether you're working in textiles and fashion, whether you're working in agriculture or the food value chain, sustainability is going to be integral to every part of the future economy. And finally, one of my favorite groups to work with are the NGOs. I get to work with WWF, with the IUCN, with charities up and down the country and all around the world as well. And I think that that's a great place for Sussex graduates to end up as well. Now, it would be much too long in a masterclass for me to go through all of the different skills you might need and all of the different tasks you might play in this sustainable economy of the future. So I wanted to bring out just a couple of them. One of the things you might be doing if you're working in green finance is helping screen portfolios against climate and nature risks. Another you might do is identify spillovers within the portfolio. Say you're working in the real estate arm of BNP Paribas. Well, real estate in BNP Paribas is subject to lots of risks around construction, around taxes, around interest rates, but it's also subject to some risk around climate change. Is that infrastructure project going to be flooded and therefore offline or not? And so you've got to think about the portfolio risks, the spillovers from outside your core business onto your core business. And that's a really exciting area that you might work in finance. If you were going to be working in big four consultancies, top things that they have to do these days are help design net zero strategies and help ensure that that sustainability reporting is compliant with ever-changing UK, EU, and international rules and laws on disclosure. And so helping identify those risks and improve sustainability reporting and disclosure is a core element of what they're doing these days. If you want to work on ESG and impact data, working, say, in a tech firm or a data firm, there's loads of really new tools and technologies coming out with the AI boom on how to quickly identify, access, clean, analyze data sets across domains that don't normally intersect. So thinking about how biodiversity data might intersect with financial data or intersect with, say, consumer demand data. Those are really exciting roles. And one of the things that you get to do there is end up building dashboards for investors or corporates. It's part of a communication tool. You have to be able to present the data in a way that decision makers can use it. And then finally, some of you may end up in government. In fact, the Government Economic Service hires quite a few Sussex graduates. And so this might be working on drafting regulation or costing the impact of regulations. You might be working at the Office for Budget Responsibility, trying to identify what are the green implications of the budget that's coming up. But you might also be thinking about, what might climate change do to the public finances in the United Kingdom, and how do you factor that into budget planning? And so this often works at the intersection of environmental science, economics, and politics. So I think it's a great place to be working. There are a lot of cool things I get to do. One of them is report writing. So there's a government somewhere or an organization that wants a bit of expertise. They don't have it in-house, but they recognize that academics have this, or that you, as someone with green skills, will have this expertise. And so they commission you to write a report. And so what I'm showing you here is one that I wrote for Qatar over the past couple of years. It came out in April. And that project actually entailed going to Doha. It's the first time I've ever been there, where I got to take my team. I'm showing you Kamiar Mahades at Cambridge and Amy Binner at Exeter. I got to take my entire team with me for a few days to Qatar, and that's where we met the late, great Dr. Jane Goodall. And it was a fantastic experience to do that. On the top right, that's a photo from Barbados earlier this year. I know it's a tough life, isn't it, working in sustainability, but you get to go to fantastic parts of the world. And that's a talk that I gave. The man in the middle is the governor of the Central Bank of Barbados, and the man just to his right, so your left as you're looking at the photo, is the global chairman of KPMG. For the states of Guernsey, I get to chair the fiscal policy panel, so I do a lot of government advice and advisory roles. And actually, they're changing their entire tax strategy at the moment, and partially the expertise that we've been able to contribute has helped that. For the United Nations, one of my favorite projects was developing actually a training course that was used and is still being used by the United Nations to upskill civil servants all around the world on questions of sustainability, climate, and the economy. So these are all just examples of the sorts of opportunities that are available to you. So why are we doing this at the University of Sussex? Well, I think it's because our students genuinely have an edge in the real world. We are top 50 globally for sustainability, top 15 in the UK for business and economics, and number one in the UK for research income. Why does that matter? For most students, research income seems a bit esoteric. It's not really your day-to-day thing. Well, here's why it does matter. It's because the research income reflects the fact that the ideas coming out of our business school are the best that the country has to offer. If they weren't, we wouldn't be pouring research pounds to the University of Sussex Business School. They're the most important cutting edge ideas. And we get to incorporate some of our students in those research projects. My work this year with KPMG, I've been working very closely with one of the MSc Sustainable Development students, who's now even been employed a couple of times by my own consultancy. So the research income at our school is hugely important because it provides opportunities to collaborate and it feeds into the teaching done right across the school. It's directly related to the fastest growing part of the UK economy. And I think that's a really rare thing to have at your disposal. And so I think you should take advantage of it. Go and speak to your professors. Speak to the faculty about the research that they're doing. Understand why it's important. Never be afraid to ask the question, who cares? That's one of the most important questions that an academic or an expert can ask. Who cares? You need to be able to explain why your expertise is valuable to people who do not share your expertise. So, what are some of the skills that you need to learn? I think you should be focusing a little bit on broad knowledge. You've got to know the science around sustainability. You've got to read about the topic, the broad topic of sustainability, not just your discipline, not just your thesis. Your thesis is important, absolutely. But very few people care about a single research question that you would put forth in a thesis or in a research paper. The vast majority of people care about the entire topic, not just your narrow research question. So that means you've got to upskill yourself. Make sure you are climate and nature literate. You've got to know about the mitigation, adaptation, biodiversity, and just transition, the skills we have here in the business school across multiple different departments. If you want to be working on the finance side, you've got to have your economic and financial basics down pat. You've got to be able to do some quant work, some data work, and understand risks and returns. If you want to work in policy and regulation, you've got to understand what the rules are at the moment, what the disclosure rules are, what the targets are, what standards are, who are the standard setters, and how can you engage with them. Broad knowledge, hugely important. You must be able to speak competently on the general topic, not just your core set of skills. But of course, there's no point in just being a generalist. You have to actually be able to do something for someone. And so take your time whilst at university to focus on building your toolkit, the set of tools and methods that you can use. You should always be imagining yourself in a job interview, and the person on the other side of the table asks, "What can you do for me?" Your job while you're at the University of Sussex is to make sure you can answer that question as comprehensively and engagingly as possible. So if all you have is, well, I can think critically, not good enough. You have to have specific tools in your toolkit that others don't, and you have to know how to use them. So if you're a data and quant person, maybe that's you're going to work with Excel and Python and R and statistics, and you're going to visualize data for people. If you want to go into financial markets, maybe it's you understand portfolio theory, you can do valuations, you can think about credit risk and how environmental science impacts all of these. If you want to work in policy and governance, you've got to be able to write policy briefs. You've got to be able to synthesize information, quantitative information very quickly. You've got to understand the process of regulation, the process of creating bills, and the process of enforcing them. If you want to work in innovation and entrepreneurship, you've got to understand innovative business models, product development, marketing, team management. This is the deep knowledge. This is your time to build skills that are going to be applicable in the real world. The skills you develop now are far more important than the marks you get in your courses. Just don't tell any of the professors I told you that. There's also some soft skills, and they're going to be hugely important as well. They're not enough on their own, but neither are the hard skills and the quant skills enough on their own. You've got to be able to tell stories with data. You've got to be able to work across disciplines and sectors. You need to be able to demonstrate how your expertise works for people in government, in business, in banks, in civil society. You've got to be able to communicate it to the media and the press and the public. You've got to make your stories engaging to regular people who are interested, but also sort of suffering information overload all the time and have too many things on their plate. You've got to be able to engage them. You must communicate with non-experts. And to be frank, this is where I end up making most of my money as a consultant. There are better people in quant. There are mathematicians and data scientists who are far better than I am. There are people in our business school who are far better in law. I have no formal training in law, but I still get to work with governments. There are others who write better and faster than I do. I certainly can't keep up with ChatGPT on writing, but what I can do is communicate and connect across multiple different sources of information, from the environmental science to the economics to the policy. And I can build relationships with people, and I can use my interpersonal skills, and I can deliver a talk in public, and I can communicate what matters in a way that's engaging to people. I'm terrible at time management. I'm terrible at stress management. But hopefully you'll be better at those than I am. So what do I think a University of Sussex student could be doing this term to help accelerate their pathway into a career in sustainability? Well, I think you could learn about sustainability topics, build up that broad knowledge. These are things you have to do over and above your coursework. Not just your coursework, that is over and above your coursework. And we have actually, the University of Sussex, the first UK business school to join the Assessments of Sustainability Knowledge program. You can go ahead and join it, and there's a link in these slides. And you can actually test your knowledge on sustainability for the real world. That's a great program. I encourage all of you to do it. It's not just learning, you have to be able to act. So what I'm encouraging you to do is complete at least one micro-credential. Maybe it's a carbon literacy certificate. Maybe it's an online course in ESG or in climate risk. Or maybe it's an online course in Python for data analysis. Pick a skill. Pick a credential that you want, that you think you might be able to apply, and go ahead and do it. Integrate sustainability with your coursework. You're going to have to write a thesis. You're going to have to write essays, policy briefs, give presentations in your courses. Treat that as a way to build up your portfolio in sustainability. Can I turn this essay or model or assignment into a one-page briefing or a dashboard? Now, you still have to do your main coursework. You have to deliver that. That's part of your degree. What I'm suggesting is on top of that, try turning it into a one-page brief that maybe a minister would want to take a look at. And then when it comes time to apply for jobs and someone's asking you, well, do you have any experience doing this? You don't have to just tell them, oh yeah, sure, I've done it. You can show them, here's my portfolio. Take a look. That's much more compelling in an interview. And the final thing that I'm going to recommend is that you must connect and network. Attend events and seminars and lectures at the University of Sussex. Attend them at other universities. Go up and speak to the presenters and connect, follow up with a personalized note. It is up to you to make sure that the movers and shakers who come through our business school know your name. We had a really exciting launch event for our Bennett Institute earlier in February this year, and two of our University of Sussex students in finance met one of the speakers. The speaker is a personal friend of mine. She's an expert. She's the global head of ESG at Citigroup. She was there giving a talk on the panel as one of the experts. She met a couple of our students and has been emailing back and forth with them every couple of weeks, giving them bespoke careers advice, helping them tailor their CVs for jobs in green finance. Go to the lectures, the seminars, the events, connect with the experts, and follow up. And I'm going to leave you just with a couple of slides now. I've been babbling on for quite a while about how hungry the world is for this sort of work. I love this field because it gets me working in high impact places in the real world with real world impact. So I get to work with the Inter-American Development Bank in Central and South America. I get to work with the International Monetary Fund, with BlackRock, with the White House, with the World Economic Forum, with the governors of the Federal Reserve of the United States and the United Nations. You can work in this field across business and government, but you also have a chance to shape the public understanding of sustainability and our future economy. One of the things that I get to do, because we do research and we deliver new insights, we get to share that with the rest of the world. And so here's just a few of the more than 300 media outlets over the past few years that have covered our research. The world needs sustainability experts. Build those skills, and the world will be coming to you to apply them. Thank you. I hope you've got some questions. I hope you've been sharing them in the chat box. And I'm going to invite Ben back now. There we are.
Hi, Matthew. How are you doing? Thank you for that. Okay, let's have a look for any questions that have come through. We've had a nice comment from Sandra, which I think was just to host some panelists, but Sandra said it was a huge pleasure to listen and learn, Matthew, and would recommend to any of their colleagues or students to study at Sussex. So thank you, Sandra. Okay, we've got a question from Ed Taylor. So the question is, what would be your advice for someone with no initial business stroke financial background, finance background?
I think it's perfectly fine if you don't have an initial business or finance background. Every sector of the economy is going to have to build in sustainability. You are the first generation for whom sustainability is not optional. It's going to have to be baked into everything we do. So whether your background is in marketing, media, psychology, history, healthcare, there's going to be a sustainability demand for your skills. If you want to give me, Ed, some details about your background, we can speak more specifically.
Thank you, Matthew. Let me just check here. I think we have another question here. How do we keep up with what employers need in sustainability when everything is changing so fast in this area?
It's a great question. Things are changing and changing very fast. The only way that I know of keeping up with the changes on the ground is to read everything you can. Read voraciously. Read what comes out in newspapers and pick the good ones, right? It's got to be Financial Times, Economist. It's got to be highly reputable places. Engage with the research seminars. Go and speak to the experts in these different companies who come through and give lectures. I think it's important to speak as well with your friends and colleagues. What jobs are they applying for? Look at the opportunities that are presented on LinkedIn. Make sure you're up to date on the regulatory changes. I'm constantly having to upskill. I constantly have to update, reflecting the new rules coming out in the budget. That changes a whole load of my research. There's no way to get around that. You've got to read voraciously. Be engaged.
Thank you, Matthew. One that's just come in, which I can probably answer, but someone's asked around accessing the slides with the links. Matthew, if you're happy, I can distribute the slides to everyone.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so I will send you the slides, and we'll also make sure you get the recording. There's a question from in the Q&A from Sub Hankara Banerjee, who's asked, so they work with extremely climate vulnerable communities in the Sundarbans, where livelihoods depend on forests and are frequently disrupted by cyclones. How can sustainability graduates position such grassroots experience when applying for roles in consultancy or government?
That's a great question. I've had the privilege of getting to go and work in Barbados, Jamaica, Rwanda. I have colleagues who've worked in probably half a dozen countries in sub-Saharan Africa, including Ethiopia. Um, and it's their on-the-ground experience that is most valuable to the consultancies. Think of it this way. Economic growth in the developed world has largely stagnated. We're happy if we get 2%. We'd love 2% growth in the UK, for instance. Economic growth in the emerging markets, we're talking 6% growth. So if you're interested in working with PwC, KPMG, Deloitte, any of the big four, where are you going to be looking? Well, they are turning to these emerging markets for new business because that's where the economies are going to be growing. There's a huge amount of activity in the Middle East. There's a huge amount of activity in Central and South America, and there's growing activity in Sub-Saharan Africa as well. That's where the new workforce is going to come from. That's where the opportunities for investments in infrastructure are going to be. And so I think it's absolutely possible to connect your experience working on the ground with those potential employers. Now, here's the gap you'll need to fill. A lot of the potential employers, a lot of the big four, are dominated by people from wealthy countries going to top universities with very expensive degrees. And they themselves have very little experience on the ground in these emerging markets and developing economies. The fact that you have some, and the University of Sussex is home to the Institute for Development Studies, which is for 9 years in a row now, #1 in development studies. The fact that you have experience and you've got those networks, I think should be hugely important.
So there was a
I think Ed Taylor came back and gave me a bit of background. So ecology and conservation for the undergraduate degree. Ed, brilliant. I think that's the best possible mix. So I assume you're in the business school now, but the niche that I try to fill is the gap between environmental science on the one hand and economics, finance, business on the other. The real challenge here is that the people who typically attend business schools or research in business and work in business schools have very little understanding of core natural science. And the people who lead on the natural science typically have very little familiarity with business and finance. And so there is a huge opportunity to add value if you can bridge that gap. So the fact that you might be in a business school now, but coming from an ecology and conservation background is absolutely brilliant. In fact, if you look at the journal Nature, earlier this year, I had an article on why business schools need more science. I think that might even be exactly the title. So go and check that out. And thank you for coming because that's exactly the skill set that I think we need. We need to combine the environmental science with economics and finance.
Thanks, Matthew. Brandon's asked, how do you see the demand for sustainability professionals evolving, particularly in the global south developing economies?
That's a great question. So look, everybody will be aware that the US administration is hostile to sustainability and economic growth. Um, you will also be aware that in places where they have difficulty accessing education, water, electricity, healthcare, um, it might seem like the green stuff is a luxury. And so maybe sustainability is not the priority. One of the things you will learn the more you study economics and sustainability and business and sustainability is that the two actually go together. The biggest growth opportunity of the 21st century is going to be in sustainability. And so, for that reason, I think that there will be demand and growing demand for it in the developing world. The caveat is that it might not always be called sustainability. It might be purely called economic growth, and that might be what the minister wants, and it might be what the public wants. And so that's what you will have to deliver. But you will have to deliver that economic growth by thinking about where do we want to invest? Do we want to invest in new infrastructure for net zero energy? Or do we want to invest in new infrastructure for coal and oil and gas? Well, what you will need to be able to do is demonstrate the relative costs and benefits of the two, identify the potential risks for both clean energy and dirty energy, and communicate them to the stakeholders and the policymakers. And what you will find is that actually on every single continent, renewable energy is now cheaper, even after subsidies, than dirty fossil fuel energy. And even if you are working in one of the countries that uses fossil fuels or that extracts and exports fossil fuels, even there's a sustainability angle. Because what we need to ensure is that those countries are using their fossil fuel resources in order to build up alternative forms of wealth and productive capacity. Think of it this way. The United Kingdom and Norway both found oil in the North Sea at about the same time. Norway developed a sovereign wealth fund so that when they extracted that oil, they reinvested the profits into a sovereign wealth fund for the good of the Norwegian people. That sovereign wealth fund is now the largest in the world, and it's worth about $250,000 per Norwegian man, woman, and child. Who amongst us wouldn't like a $250,000 endowment today? The UK found oil at the same time, but we did not create a sovereign wealth fund. And so what do we have to show for it? The oil is gone, the climate is destroyed, and we have nothing left to show for it. Understanding these differences in the way that policy governs the extraction of oil and gas and the way that it affects the long-term wealth of the nation is hugely important. And there is demand even for those sorts of skills and insights in the developing world as well.
Thank you, Matthew. Saul was asked, what would be the best way to pivot into sustainability for someone in digital finance and innovation?
What would be the best way to pivot into finance? Or someone in finance to pivot into sustainability? Well, look, sustainable finance is a really hot topic these days. Lots of people are looking for ways to make their pensions sustainable. Lots of people are looking for ways to make their ISAs sustainable. But it's really tough, actually, to know where I should be putting my money in order to have both the best bang for its buck and in order to minimize the carbon implications or the biodiversity footprint. So if you can start developing tools and metrics, working with companies that are already on this topic, then I think that might be a really good way to get connected with it. What you'll have to do for that is learn some of the core science and learn some of those key metrics and benchmarks that are out there at the moment.
Thank you, Matthew. A couple of anonymous questions, and I might group these together actually, because I think they could work together. So how do we improve our soft skills, things like public speaking, communications? And is there any way that we can volunteer or learn more about sustainability?
Well, I think those questions answer themselves, right? So how do you build these soft skills? I don't know. The way that I did it was just by doing it. So my first time on television news was I was being interviewed live on Channel 4 News by Jon Snow. Now, Jon Snow is one of the UK's most respected journalists. and has been for decades. He's covered wars, political events, economic events, one of the most respected and piercing journalists in the UK. I was intimidated and nervous. Um, we were filming live on location at some biodiversity reserve by the RSPB. It was muddy and slippery. Uh, there was cow manure all over the place. I'm trying to think of how do I answer the questions in the interview whilst not slipping in the mud and falling into the swamp. Um, I had known that I was going to give this interview for about 3 days. They called me on a Friday, and the interview was on a Monday. So I spent the entire weekend prepping my talking points, writing my speech that I was going to deliver. I get there. I'm thinking mostly about don't fall in the mud. He asked me a question which wasn't the question that I was expecting. It's not the one they emailed me ahead of time. Um, there was one other person speaking. It was Becky Spate. She was the CEO of the RSPB. By the time that interview was over, I hadn't said any of the things I anticipated saying. I had no idea what I had actually said. I had to watch it back before I could learn what I had actually said. And my legs were shaking. But it was a trial by fire, and it was some of the best media training I've ever had. And so my suggestion to you, if you want to learn these soft skills, it's just go out and do them. Give presentations. If there isn't an opportunity, make the opportunity. Get your colleagues together, get the other students together, and have a competition. Challenge. Who's going to give the best speech? Give yourselves 7 minutes apiece. Who's going to give the best presentation on a topic? Just do it.
Moyo's got a question. So Moyo's completing an MSc in energy policy and wants to broaden their impact beyond clean cooking. Given Moyo's practical experience and the policy limitations they've seen firsthand, how could they frame a move into the wider sustainability landscape?
Well, I mean, it's a fairly broad question. I actually think having that degree and having expertise in clean cooking is actually a great basis to go and work in that area. One of the big challenges that we have now is air pollution and health. Air pollution, in fact, has a huge impact on human health and on labor productivity. But one of the biggest sources now is indoor air pollution coming from the fact that we use gas cookers. That creates exhaust and we're breathing it in. So going and working with the manufacturers, working with the retailers, working with regulators, working with government, these would all be options of places to work specifically in that field with the expertise you've already built. Now, if you want to broaden your base, it's often opportunistic. That's the way it's worked for me. The way I got that interview on Channel 4 News, it's not because they desperately wanted Matthew Agarwala, who at the time was still just a PhD student. They wanted Professor Sir Partha Dasgupta, the top environmental economist at the University of Cambridge, and he wasn't available. So the press office sent them to me instead, and so I took the chance. Uh, I wanted to work in government advisory, so I searched through the list of opportunities to go and work and advise the government. There's some in DEFRA, there's some in DESNES, there's some in every government department. And you just start applying. The best way, I think, to learn to do something is to just go out and do it. I think it's the fastest way. It's stressful, a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of anxiety, a lot of heartburn, but it's the best way to learn.
Thank you, Matthew. A couple of questions have come in which are of a similar nature again, so I might put them together. It's around starting a career in sustainability and how can candidates stand out? What is it they can do to really stand out? And how would you navigate the early stages of a career in sustainability if you had to start now?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there are at least two ways. I'm risk averse. So I went the lower risk route. I went the route where a university would employ me, and that would be my base salary, and that's how I would pay my bills. But I also wanted to earn more than a university was going to deliver, and I wanted to diversify. What if the university closes down? What if I lose my job? What do I have as a backup? So I created a consulting company as well. Um, Now, the consultancy can be quite lucrative in some years, more than I earn as an academic. In other years, it's next to nothing. So it's high risk, but can be high reward. Um, Both of those options sort of uh, I think would be good ways to go forward. So one is you try and get a job that somebody else gives you working in their company, in their organization. It's their responsibility to bring in the money, your responsibility to complete your tasks. The other is you found a company of your own, and then it's your job to go out and find clients and get people to pay for you. It's your job to find someone who wants you to come and give a lecture uh, to their business group, to their company, and to charge them for doing so. It's your job to find someone who wants you to write a report on a particular area of sustainability for them. And then you write the report and you get paid. It's a fantastic way to do it, but it's high risk.
Thank you. There's a couple more questions. We're getting close to the hour mark, but there's still a couple of questions in the chat here. So, Cherry, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. What advice do you have to best leverage existing experience into the sustainability field? And in this particular example, it's traditional finance and accounting experience from someone who's currently undertaking the MSc in sustainable finance and accounting, but needs to leverage their previous experience into the green sector.
Well, I think one of the challenges that we often find in green finance is that people come in with great ideals about green, but they don't actually understand the basics of finance. And so if you've got a background in the core fundamentals of finance and how it works, I think that's a really good asset. The question then is, okay, well, how do you start moving into the portfolio of work where you get to deal with sustainability? Well, a lot of financial companies, the big banks, all have sustainability departments. You can go and talk to them. You could switch employers and go and find one of the employers that has opportunities in green finance and apply and go and work with them. It depends on what your actual background is in. Are you portfolio management, asset management? Are you risk modeling, etc.? One of my most fruitful areas of work has been around risk modeling and incorporating climate science and ecological science into economic models to understand sovereign risk markets, sovereign debt markets. And that's been a really lucrative way forward for us. We've had projects in half a dozen countries. We've got 6 central banks that are using our results. We've got some of the world's top 10 biggest banks who are now clients of ours, buying our data, buying the results from our research. So there's really good opportunities there. You can either work directly for one of these companies, or you can open up your own business, produce the results, and then sell them.
Thank you. There was another question from Jason. I think it was around quite similar, Jason. I think maybe Matthew's answered your question there as well. It was similar around bridging the gap between sustainability and international trade. But I guess some of the
Oh, that one's hugely important. Sustainability and trade, fantastic. So, did you know that at the University of Sussex, we are home to the UK Trade Policy Observatory? It is the go-to place for advice and insight on trade and policy across the United Kingdom. We have some of the best economists, trade lawyers. It's a fantastic group. And actually, they have a conference coming up. I think the 1st of December is their annual conference in London. So do check out the UK Trade Policy Observatory, and they are absolutely experts in sustainability as well. We're talking about Emily Lydgate, Alan Winters, Fiona Matthews. I mean, we have fantastic expertise here. One of my favorite areas in sustainability at the moment is exactly on international trade. one of the big policy developments out of the European Union in recent years is called CBAM, Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. And the reason this is exciting and important is what happens if the European Union imposes really strict carbon legislation domestically inside Europe? Well, one risk is that businesses in Europe have to face high carbon prices, which is essentially like a tax on their business. But businesses outside of Europe get to avoid all of that legislation and don't have to pay those taxes, so they get a competitive advantage. So European policy would then be creating a competitive advantage for non-European businesses. So in order to level the playing field, Europe is introducing what's called CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, whereby if you produce goods outside of Europe and those goods or services release lots of carbon, if you want to export them into Europe, those goods and services will face a carbon tax at the border so that you face externally the same carbon incentives that European businesses face internally. So international trade is absolutely one of the core areas. And in fact, we hosted at the University of Sussex an away day for three different government departments with the IDS on these sorts of topics as well. So that's a great area to be working in.
Thank you, Matthew. There's one more question, if you're okay to answer that. We are at
Sure.
1 o'clock. It's from Adam. And Adam, thank you for sharing the link to the Nature article as well that Matthew mentioned. I've seen you've posted that further up, so thank you. But Adam wants to get a bit more information around consultancy. So you talked about setting up consultancy companies. What does that mean in terms of setting up a consultancy company? And what are you offering? What can you offer and how?
Right. So I'm a consultant. I have a consulting company. The way that happened was somebody contacted me, a philanthropic organization contacted me and said, "We've seen some of your research on climate, around how climate change will affect sovereign debt markets. We're interested in how nature loss might affect sovereign debt markets. Could you produce some analysis on this topic for us?" I said, "Yes, I could do it, but it will cost you." That contract was going to be about £100,000. But I needed to have some colleagues along with me. So it wasn't 100K for me, it was 100K for our team. Now, in order to ensure that I'm following all of the rules around taxes and that everybody was being paid and treated fairly, and that I had limited liability so that if I made a mistake in this report and somebody made a big financial bet on it, they can't come and sue me and take my house. In order to protect myself from these sorts of things, I created a limited company. So I contacted an accountant. There's a local accountant here in Norwich that I use. They're fantastic. They did all of the paperwork for me. It cost probably a hundred or so to do the paperwork to register a new company with Companies House. I then have to find a client. The client found me in this case. That was very nice. I start producing the technical analysis. I do the maths and the statistics and the data analysis. I write the report. I send that to the client. I produce an invoice, send them the invoice. They pay the money into my account. And then I have to pay my taxes on it, and I have to pay my subcontractors and all the people who worked with me. But that's kind of how it started out. Then my business expanded, not just doing the report writing, which the project in Qatar, where I got to meet Jane Goodall, was also one of these projects. I also do public speaking. So when I went to Qatar and delivered that talk, I charged money because it's taking time out of my day. I do executive education for governments and for businesses. They want expertise on a topic. I offer it, but I charge for the day rate. So I give public talks and charge for those. I give executive education and charge for those. I do data analysis, policy briefs, and charge for all of those. And it's a great way to work because it means that the topics you're focusing on are the topics that your clients actually need answered. So you know you're going to have real world impact because they're only paying you because they need the answer to that question.
Thank you, Matthew. There is one more question. I'm conscious of your time, but if you're okay to, maybe we'll make
Sure.
this the last one. So Sue was asked, it's quite a broad question, but it's a good one. In your opinion, what are some of the biggest challenges in sustainability at the moment?
Oh, the biggest challenges in sustainability. I think we're not very good at understanding how biodiversity loss affects individual businesses. So I think that's an area for really important high impact research. I think we're also not very good at linking biodiversity loss to financial markets. So I think that's a big challenge. Um, Geopolitically, there is a challenge, which is that with the cost of living crisis, with the US retreating from global leadership, with the rise of populism, there is a sort of anti-sustainability sentiment, and that could be a problem. The way that businesses and financial institutions that I've worked with have dealt with that is what we call green hushing. They still understand the business opportunities and they're not going to give up on them. But they're maybe being a little more quiet about it. Instead of having an ESG, they've got an ESG head, they've got someone who's working on risk and resilience. It's the same stuff, different name, but they're trying to fly under the radar of the anti-climate people. Um, I think one of the challenges is probably going to be around AI. It's very easy to get ChatGPT to spit out a bit of slop that gets you about 65% of the way there to understanding a problem. 65% of the way is not good enough. I think it's pretty close to useless. But it's tough to compete because they can churn stuff out really fast. You have to have that deep knowledge and deep expertise to combat that.
Thank you, Matthew. And that looks like all the questions. So I think we'll end it there if that's okay with you. Thank you so
Perfect.
much, Matthew. It's been really interesting. I hope everyone has enjoyed it. There's been lots of questions, which is fantastic. As I said at the beginning, I will make sure you will get the slides and the recording. And yes, so I'll email you, and you can always respond to me with any further questions, perhaps for Matthew. Matthew, thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we end?
I'd like to thank you, Ben, and Maricia for helping organize this event. It's really a huge honor to give one of these master classes for the University of Sussex. I want to thank everybody who attended, and I just want to leave everyone with the confidence that actually sustainability is a fantastic place to work. It's taken me all around the world. I get to work with businesses, financial institutions, governments, NGOs, universities, students. It's absolutely the place to be, and I just want to share that with all of our Sussex students as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Matthew. Thanks, everyone. Take care.